our business model is even relevant anymore? Do you need to have a business model at all? So I have some panelists that I really admire some of their work. I'll let them all introduce themselves, but they are on stage joining us to discuss the failure of business models. Adriana, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Cassie. So we have here on the end David Weekley, who is the founder and chairman of PB Works, which has gone through a lot of twists and turns in terms of its business model. And in the middle is Peter Gardner, managing director of WavePoint Ventures, which invests in seed stage companies. And then Ethan Block, who is the founder and co-founder of Flowtown, which has also had a long and twisting road in terms of its business model and has recently been acquired by Demandforce. So my goal is to get to as many of your questions as possible. So just if you have a question at any point during this talk, just raise your hand as high as possible, and I think someone will run over and get you. But I wanted to start and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what exactly a business model is. And I was talking to Ethan earlier, and he mentioned that it's more, in his mind, more than just the way that a company makes money. So Ethan, why don't you talk about what you consider a business model to be?
Sure. Before I do that, I just want to thank Cassie for putting this amazing event together and everyone helping her. This is one of my favorite events of the year. I went to the first one 2 years ago as an attendee, and so I'm super humbled to actually be here this year. And then I also want to see who wants to learn how to fail with your business model. We should be seeing everyone's hand. Amazing. Who wants to do that this afternoon as you're in your coma post-lunch? Well, you're in the right place. As Adriana said, I'm Ethan Block. I was one of the co-founders of Flowtown, and we built marketing tools for small businesses. We were just recently acquired about 2 weeks ago by a company by the name of Demandforce. And so your question was, is a business model just about, party app? No. Is a business model just about making money, or is it more than that?
That is the question. Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, so I'm of this belief. I don't know how many people are familiar with, Steve Blank and Eric Ries and Alexander Osterwalder, which is like the business model is like this puzzle you put together, and it's not just about making money. That's one piece of it. But you have to figure out what value are you going to deliver, how are you going to reach your customers, who are your customers, what are you going to sell them at what price, and then like what are your costs? And when you net all that stuff out, do you have a successful business model or do you not? And the pieces that aren't successful are the pieces you keep trying to it's like the Apollo spaceship. You're trying to put a circle in a square and you're like, no, it's not gonna work. Let's try this piece and this piece. And you keep working around that until you actually have a model that works. I mean, that's how we look at it. That's how we looked at it at Flowtown.
Mm-hmm. David, do you have anything to say about that in terms of your experience with PB Works?
Yeah, I think that the main pivot points for us happened when it became clear that the current movie that was playing, if we hit fast forward, would not end up anywhere plausibly good. And I think that's a pretty good point at which to change the plot, introduce a plot twist.
And what was that point, and how did you realize that things had reached it?
Oh, there have been a couple. One was we originally thought that the service, which is a hosted collaboration service, was going to be advertising supported. And we started getting increased traffic. We got lots of page views. I had Google AdSense there. We optimized it. And at the end of the month, we had $500. And I decided, well, it'd probably be prudent to run some napkin math and figure out how could we make this into an $100 million a year business? Like, how many people would need to be using my service to make this a big company? And the answer was pretty much every group on the planet would need to have internet access and be using us daily. And so I figured that's not a plausible movie to hit fast forward on. So maybe I ought to adjust models.
So in terms of adjusting models, Peter, you said that there's a difference between a pivot that's based on market demand and something that's just an example that you're floundering. How do you tell the difference as a VC?
Yeah, well, we're wrong frequently, first of all. But we invest at a seed stage in a team and a core technology. We have some assumptions going in about what we think the right target application is, but until we get out into the marketplace and really test it with customers, we don't know whether those assumptions are right or not. And when we go into the marketplace and find that, frankly, the folks we thought would care don't, we have a choice to make. We can either pivot and try to apply that technology or that solution to a different market or bail out. And not only is it difficult for a board of directors and kind of the relationship between the board and the entrepreneur, but it's a difficult dynamic inside of a partnership where you have a portfolio. There's different companies, frankly, competing for capital. And so not only do the board and the entrepreneurs need to convince themselves, but then each venture firm needs to be convinced, or a subset of those venture firms need to be convinced to keep funding that company. So we try to spend a lot of time with the entrepreneur along the way so we understand why the original market didn't pan out, understand the rationale behind the pivot. Sometimes we'll bring in an advisor or one of our other partners to kind of take a less emotional look at the situation and try to help the board member to figure out whether they've just gotten too close to it. And we try to invest in some deep intellectual property so that if we decide we do want to pivot, then we have an asset that we can take into the new market.
And I would add or argue that it's, in my experience and opinion, very dangerous to raise a shit ton of money before you've actually figured out your business model. Like, you can raise a seed round and you can have a few guys or a few guys and girls, and you figure out your business model, and then it makes sense to go and raise a shit ton of money. There's a saying that, like, if you raise money, a lot of it, you don't know what you're going to spend it on, you've already sold your company, you just don't realize it. Because and when you have all this money and you're not like scrappy and trying to figure it out, you start to make different decisions that you just wouldn't make if you didn't have a bank account with all these zeros in it.
Ethan, would you say that Flowtown was scrappy and had to figure it out? And if
Definitely,
so, how
yeah.
did you do it?
I mean, we were bootstrapped for 13 months. We didn't raise any significant amount of money until we actually were profitable. When we came out with the product, we were a B2B product, and so it's like, if you're not going to charge for it and make money, who exactly are you selling to? Because you're selling to businesses. Businesses have budgets. They should be paying. So it's a little bit different. But even to a consumer, I mean, you can look at a lot of companies. I can only reflect on my own. But if you just look at Instagram, they really figured something out before they went and raised $8 million. Whereas maybe a company like Color went out and had great DNA, but they raised $40 million before they really knew what their model was. And now you could argue Instagram doesn't really have a model because it's not making money yet, but the important part of their model is definitely figured out, which is what value are we delivering to users, and how do we reach those users, and then let's make that scale as vastly as possible.
Yeah, it's hard for me to agree more strongly with that. I mean, our whole model is small rounds of financing early on and figure out what you've got before you throw money at it. And, once you build the burn rate of a company, it's really hard to dial it back. So, and when you take capital, I'm sometimes sitting around at an event like this and people are boasting about, I raised 10 million or I raised 15 million. Like, that's an achievement. That's not an achievement, that's an obligation, and when you take on that obligation, you need to understand how you're going to put that money to work in a way that's going to build asset value for both you, your employees, and your investors. And if you haven't gotten far enough along in the business planning process to understand who your customer is and what your channels are and who's going to pay you for delivering that solution, and whether anybody cares, you're just pissing money away.
I don't know what kind of companies we have represented in the room, but David, you mentioned that there's a difference in terms of the importance of the business model for a consumer-oriented product versus an enterprise product. So what is that difference that you told me about?
Yeah, I would say that people talk sometimes about the differences in model between a B2C and a B2B application, but I think what we're finding out is that that's not really actually the right boundary to pick. The right boundary to pick is this a self-serve model or is this like a hands-on sale model, right? And there's still spaces for both kinds of companies. I think that we have seen an increase in the scale and success of self-serve companies. Intruding into previously hand-selling situations. But I think each requires a different technique, and I think where we've seen a lot of the lean startup methodology get applied is in the self-service model space. And this is coming from somebody who has seen very vigorous competition from people who attacked the space in different ways. Jive Software, for instance, is a competitor to PBWorks and went out into the collaboration space in a very different way than we were doing. Raised a huge round, hired some very senior people, and immediately flew a fairly large team of CIOs from around the country to Aspen for a all expenses paid week there. And we laughed. We were like, this is not lean. You guys are doing this stuff wrong. You don't understand the new way of the world, right? And we thought, their investors are going to be very sad very quickly. And it turned out that that wasn't really the case. So I think there are market strategies of going big with a hands-on sale approach that we've seen almost all the enterprise companies take, that still has its place. So I think that's an interesting distinction.
Again, you guys, it's all about you, so if you have questions, pipe up. But I wanted to just ask David a little bit about his specific pivot. Tell everyone about the time you changed the whole product that you were selling. At first you thought you were selling one thing, but in actuality, it was something else.
Yeah. So since I'm a technologist and I had built a wiki product, I thought I was in the business of selling wikis without realizing that that was not actually the end utility that my customers were purchasing. They were buying the ability to collaborate, the ability to work together in a team on several different projects. And the way that we discovered this was we generally have annual contracts on the hosted wiki solution, and we'd call people up about 11 months into their contract and say, hey, are you planning on renewing? And they'd say no. And we'd say, oh, okay, I'm sorry, did you not like the product? And they'd say, no. It was a 4-month project that we used the wiki for, and so I haven't touched this thing in more than half a year, right? So there's no way I'm going to renew for a dead project. We said, And then we had another when at the end of a half-hour conference call with an Accenture CIO, he ended up concluding that, yeah, okay, well, we're okay to go and buy your $35 a month product. And I said, we're not really pricing this thing right. So it became clear that what we wanted to do was solve our customers' problems. That's sort of like at the core of any good business model. Somebody out there has a problem and they know they have a problem and are willing to throw money at solving that problem. So the problem that they had in this case was internal coordination and also coordination with customers. So we said, all right, well, what if we let you make as many wikis as you want, but we charge you on a per employee basis, because that's how you're paying for most of your other SaaS solutions anyhow. And they said, okay, that sounds like a pretty good idea to me. So we had to change our product to allow a given user within a security domain to create as many wikis as they wanted. And then charge them on a per user per month basis, just like the other companies were doing, instead of selling them wikis. So that then was selling them a solution that actually solved their problems versus selling them wikis.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say, we were tripped up by something similar with our first product, but an actual tactical tip for everyone here that I learned from a guy by the name of Sean Ellis, who's like a world-class marketer now, is doing his own startup, was when you first launch your product on the homepage, actually talk about the feature and don't talk about the benefit. So in your case, it would have been like, get a wiki. Hopefully they knew what a wiki was. And then when they're using it after a month or 2 months, you would say, what's the greatest benefit you've received from using our product? And you would have heard people, and this is our case, you would hear people saying, we got to collaborate versus we got to use a wiki. And then all of a sudden, as you get more users and you're figuring out that benefit, then you start honing your marketing message around what your customers are telling you is the greatest benefit from the actual feature you then delivered them. Our original version of Flowtown used to turn an email address into a social profile. And we launched out of the gate, we were like, build strong relationships with your customers because you want to do that, you're going to make lots of money. And people were like, all right, that doesn't, sure. And then we switched it to turn an email address to a social profile, and all of a sudden people were like, oh, I get what that does. And then we would ask them, what does this do? Oh, it helps me write better emails. Helps me understand who my customers are. And so it was a very big lesson for us.
Who on this panel has examples of companies that failed to do that ignored the writing on the wall and just were unable to adapt and met with bad results?
How many you want?
Start with one.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, a subtext here is market timing, and part of being able to get away for a little while with an incomplete business model, and I won't say no business model, because I think most companies have at least some idea about a business model, even if it may be wrong, over time. But part of it is, can you stay lean so that you don't need to raise a lot of capital? But if you need some, are you able to stay funded while you're sorting it out? And a lot of that has to do with market timing and whether there's perception in the market about whether what you're doing is important. So, I was on the board and an investor early on in an online radio company, and this goes back a little while. And we got really excited because the company was started by people that came out of the radio business and were really well regarded. And they were all about, we're going to create really high production value in radio. Internet radio was this hot emerging topic, and we were able to raise a decent amount of money for it. But the challenge was that the advertiser had not yet decided they cared about the medium. And the cost of bandwidth was way too expensive at that time. So, they were burning more money than they should have. And ironically, they started growing like mad, but the faster they grew, the faster they burned cash because of their cost of goods sold. So ultimately, we couldn't keep them funded long enough, even though it was a great product and getting lots of adoption. We couldn't keep them going long enough for the advertisers to catch up, and they failed. And companies like Pandora, for instance, that were started around the same time, now a public company, ended up succeeding partly because they adopted a solution to programming that fundamentally had a lower cost of goods sold, and they probably grew a little bit more slowly, and ironically, that's what kept them in the game, and they could kind of get across the desert. So, never underestimate the value of market timing, and it really goes back to not only pursuing sort of a staffing strategy and a salary strategy and everything else, to keep your burn rate low, but you got to ask yourself whether you have a product that has a cost of goods sold that's just broken. Because if you're too early and that's the case, it's really tough to stay in the game.
So, it sounds more to me that it's not necessarily the failure of business models, it's the failure of business models that can't adapt. Would you all agree with that? Yeah. And I don't know how many people know the specific story of what happened to Flowtown when Facebook had its little, you want to?
Change of heart?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I think that's a great example of being able to make a change.
The version of Flowtown, and there's been so many, I can't even remember which was which, but it's actually kind of true, there were 3. But the version of Flowtown that people actually got to know in mass was this really simple CRM for small businesses. You'd import your email addresses, we'd go out and grab all the public data we could find, and then paint really rich pictures about who your customers are, so you could send better emails. And we could do things like 90% of your customers are on Facebook, 50% of them aren't yet a fan. Click one button to create an email and invite them to become a fan. And we grew that to about 26,000 businesses in 11 months, a team of 8. We were almost profitable. We raised about $750,000 in angel financing. And then one day, Facebook changed their terms of service and pretty much made what we were doing overnight illegal in their world. And that was kind of like one of those oh shit moments more than anything. And I apologize for the cursing ahead of time, but I'm not dropping any F-bombs, just a few shits. Me and my co-founder Dan, over the weekend, thankfully it was sort of on a Friday, we realized this. We look at each other and we're like, we're not quitting here. We have to change the product, but we're not quitting. Brought everyone in on Monday morning, sat the team down, pretty much said everything we've done for the past 12 months stops today. Here's what we're thinking about for the future. And 2 weeks later, we released a product called Timely. Now, we always kept the vision the same. And the vision was always, we want to help small businesses get and keep customers through these new channels. And so by keeping the vision the same, we sort of just pivoted around what product we were actually delivering. And so we were able to come out with another product that was right to the same customer type, solving a very similar pain point. And we grew that to about 27,000 professionals in 10 months after that. And then we came out with the new version of Flowtown this April, and then we were, really just acquired in October now. Go ahead.
The wisdom that you get from understanding a customer's pain is never something you need to backpedal on. It's never something that you pivot on. Like that's
exactly
irrefutable knowledge.
Yeah, and if you find that and you figure out a way to sell them something that they pay more than it costs you, then you can create a business, hopefully.
Just from an investor point of view, we get asked all the time, what are the attributes you look for in an entrepreneur? And if I were to give one, it would absolutely be adaptability. And it's interesting. And as a team, when we invest in teams, there's a lot of tension in that adaptation process. I mean, first of all, you have a technical folks on the team who are from a technical perspective, folks on the team who are from a marketing perspective. So there's that natural tension. There's a tension between leading your customers and listening to your customers. And there's sort of a fine line there. And the teams that get it right, it's kind of a special sauce. And those are folks that often are successful serial entrepreneurs because they can take that sort of balance and apply it to a series of markets over time.
I just noticed we have like less than 15 minutes, so if you guys have questions, now is the time.
Is there anything you want us to particularly like drill down on more with actual like examples from what we've done or like tips or like tricks? Here we go. Oh, no, oh, she's running the mic. I guess we're gonna share now.
Wait, is there somebody? No, yes.
Sorry, I was hiding behind the camera guy for a while. What can you like illustrate something of the difference between like we all know we're not supposed to marry a solution, we're supposed to marry a problem, but like the difference between like being really stuck on a solution and being really stuck on a business model, and like where do you draw the line between this is my solution and this is my business model, which do you turn the dials on more frequently to what responses?
If I think, so your question is, what's the difference between like, hey, this is what we're solving and this is how we're actually gonna like run a company solving this problem? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the solution, if you're really sold on the solution, the goal would be to say, okay, what's every kind of customer that may ever buy this? What's every kind of way we may ever reach them? What's every kind of price we may ever charge? And test those things, and then if you can't do that, then change your solution.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's pretty common for us technologists to come up with a technology and then start looking around for a buyer. And that can be pretty dangerous. Just speaking from personal experience, when I started my company alone in the fall of 2003, I spent pretty much the first 18 months devising this incredible, ingenious system for improving instant messaging that I called I Am Smarter. And it had incredible scalability. This thing was designed to be able to serve millions of instant messaging users at the same time and be live updatable, and had 4 patents filed on it, and was shocked and astounded to find out that basically nobody cared because I had marketed it wrong. But I think it's common to think, I've built this cool technology, surely there's some pretty bow I can put on it, and somebody will want to give me a lot of money and make me famous for this. And I think that's dangerous. I think it's better to start from a place of understanding real needs that exist there in the world, and your own needs are valid for that. But I think starting from a place of a cool piece of IP, while sometimes it works out, can be dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly struggling with the difference between a technology and a solution, because we invest at such an early stage that you have to develop the technical foundation before you can then figure out how to apply it to a particular business problem in a particular market. And one of the areas where a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, get trapped is they spend too much time building the foundation, don't get it out into the marketplace early enough to figure out who the target customer is, and you burn time and money building the foundation, never have time to build a house. And so at a certain point, you just have to put a stake in the ground and say, okay, we've gotten that market feedback. We're going to go after that person. It's not the entire market, but it's a person we think has a real problem we can solve. And we're going to make some compromises from a technical point of view and a product point of view in order to really solve that person's problem. And yes, it's narrowing this big, beautiful white space that gets us all excited. But you have to find a point of penetration, otherwise you're just going to run out of room.
I mean, how many of you have read Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm? Yeah. So I mean, this is chasm theory, right? You start with somebody, and it doesn't have to be a huge group of people whose real problem you actually solve, and then who's willing to pay you some money for it. And that doesn't mean that you will only ever be solving that limited population, but it grounds what you're delivering in reality in a way that you might not be if you're just sitting at home creating cool programs.
Yeah, I mean, I've literally sat around board meetings and just said, would you please just bet the company? Please, just stop, looking at the whole world. You get to points where you just have to make that bet.
Oh, no, I just thought maybe Ethan wants to say something and
nothing
he's
further to
mute
add.
now. The flip side of it is, Peter, you were telling me that it can be dangerous when entrepreneurs get a notion in their head that, business models are completely unnecessary and that it sends a bad message. What evidence do you see of that? I mean, is that the thinking out there among people who come to you?
I don't think that, you ought to start a company, with the idea that you seek to not have a business model, right? I mean, you in fact are seeking to find someone who will pay you, for what you're trying to deliver in a legitimate, market need. So I think you accept, as an entrepreneur, uncertainty in your business model for a certain period of time. You establish a process very early on, hopefully, to resolve as much of that uncertainty as possible, as cheaply as possible. But sometimes we get entrepreneurs who almost boast about the fact that I don't need a business model, or I don't have a business model because Zuckerberg didn't have a business model at the beginning, and he did fine, and yeah, but 5 nines of the other guys didn't. So uncertainty is okay, but it's not something you seek.
Yeah, and I think whether you accept it or not, you have a business model. It's like having like a massive birthmark on your face and like pretending, I don't know if anyone does, sorry, but it's pretending you don't. And, it's better to accept that and be like, I'm still cool as shit and I'm gonna deal with it, That's, you're gonna have a business model. So whether you're Zuckerberg or anybody, it's probably easier to accept it early on and be like, damn, this business model sucks, I'm never gonna make any money. Let's figure out that piece. And then let's see if this is even potentially a business.
I see a question with a red shirt or something red out there.
Something red, yeah. Hi, I know there's been a lot written about pricing, but I'm curious about the psychology of it and how you manage expectations and how you figure out what to ask for your sweat and blood, and also specifically like how to go through the alpha beta general release transition with pricing, sort of just how you think about that in your experiences with the psychology of pricing.
Well, I would say one of the biggest ahas for me was that people love getting special discounts. People don't love getting special prices, if that distinction makes sense. So there was, there's a lot of brouhaha if you find out that somebody else paid a different price than you for the same can of Campbell's tomato soup, right? Because that feels unfair. That appeals to our sense of injustice. But if it's listed at $2 and I have a 50-cent coupon and you have a 25-cent coupon, nobody thinks that's unfair. I just think I'm more clever because I got the 50-cent coupon. And I understand if somebody else got a 75-cent coupon, they might be even more clever than I, right? But that feels fair, right? So I feel like that's a cool trick for experimenting with prices. You start with a baseline price that feels pretty darn expensive, and then you offer selective discounts to different populations to try and suss out what feels right. And this is actually how all enterprise pricing works. You take a look at what is the list price for Oracle, and it's obscene, it's absurd. It's got a few too many zeros in it, right? So anyone who's been in business and bought from big companies like Oracle or Dell or Microsoft knows that it comes down to a negotiation. Because they don't want to put you out of business by charging you too much, but they only want you to just barely be in business because you're paying them so much money. So their sales rep has this delicate balance to figure out of what's the point at which you wince, but still say yes, and that's the appropriate price point. Now, in a self-service model, your algorithm's job is to find that point, right? In a direct sales model, like I was talking about earlier, the two different models, you have a human who's doing that pattern matching, who's very well compensated to get that pattern matching correct.
You have any thoughts on pricing?
I think that's great. I think that's totally right. I think, especially if you're a business product, or if you're going to charge for your product, charge as early as possible, because that conversation is really awkward to have with existing customers when you have thousands of them. And most likely, if you want to treat them right, you got to leave them on the pricing they're on when they're in like the beta period. I mean, it depends how you personally want to treat your customers. What we did with the new version of Flowtown, we used a product called Recurly, and we just spun up a bunch of pricing pages. It's really cool. You can create like 20 of them, all different pricing. And me and Dan, we were in sort of direct contact with every user. We would just send them in an email, oh, it's $500 a month, and it's the early bird special. And it'd be like, early bird special, $500 a month. It'd be like, oh, it's $750 a month, it's $999 a month. And people would just upgrade on these things. And so we would just keep throwing out pricing. I mean, there was some guy that actually got in at $20 a month. There's someone else paying for the same product at $500 a month. And we kind of figured out by just loosely throwing out these pages what people were actually pulling their credit cards for, and then what those people were doing with the product, because they were clearly getting a lot of value out of it if they were paying $500 a month.
And an important corollary to this is that people telling you, yeah, I definitely pay for that, is worth absolutely nothing. So don't consider it market validation to go and pass a demo prototype around to your friends and have them fill out a Survey Monkey, and 90% of them say, yeah, I would totally pay money for that. That's actually ask people for money.
Yeah, and just, briefly, one other suggestion is don't run to the lowest common denominator on pricing. When you're first going into a market and you're just desperate to generate leads, you're going to get all kinds of cats and dogs, and you just want customers, right? There's that desperate need to get to that validation point. But, we see a lot of companies that take on the wrong customers, and then not only are they losing money on those customers, but they've screwed up the pricing. It's very hard to move up in pricing once you've set it. So be willing to say no to customers early on. It's a really counterintuitive thing, but it's key.
We have one question back here.
Yeah.
Ethan, I just wanted to talk more about the pricing experiment that you guys went through. Earlier you said you had tens of thousands of customers. Surely you guys weren't sort of emailing each one of those individually. I'm just worried. The question is more around the self-service model and testing the waters on pricing for that. Is there a set process that you can go through to test those waters, or you guys were literally just emailing every single person with what you think they could afford to pay?
Yeah, so for the example I just gave was with the most recent version of Flowtown, and we never had over a few hundred customers for that. But for the sort of original version, I still, to the day we got shut down, would email a handful of users every single day that signed up every single day. And as almost we call it a customer coaching. So I was always involved in that process, even when we had tens of thousands of users and customers. But there's a lot of great tools out there to split test, pricing if you're going to do it on a purely scientific way. The way we did it with the most recent version of Flowtown wasn't all that scientific. We're just emailing links and seeing who upgrades and how much they paid. But there's a ton of awesome blog posts and awesome detail. If Heaton's here from Kissmetrics, I'm sure he could point you in some amazing directions on where it really makes sense to spend time in terms of optimizing for pricing.
I've heard good things about Optimizely. I haven't actually used them.
We have less than 2 minutes, so if there's a question, that would be great. But if not, I'm just wondering, is there a question? No. As an entrepreneur, what's the difference between sticking to your vision and being stupidly stubborn when it comes to this business model thing?
I think you got to be stubborn as shit, personally. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I'm of this belief that if you're the entrepreneur, no one knows the path except for you. And if you fail, then you fail, but at least, you weren't confused. You knew exactly what you were doing, and you failed. That's great, you probably learned something. That's my personal belief.
Yeah, I think you need to be stubborn, you need to be persistent, but you need to listen, particularly to your customers. But, I think a lot of good entrepreneurs kind of create a group of people around them that become their people just to test ideas, to tell them they're wrong, to poke at their assumptions, and learn through that process. And it helps you just to avoid the obvious pitfalls as you go.
I think cutting out a small bit of time every year to reflect on what were my hypotheses, what did I take as axiomatic going into this, what's changed, do I still believe in the vision that I had a year ago, what do I need to tweak and check about that is important. Not to self-doubt, still being sure that you ultimately will come to success, but having an open mind to the facts and incorporating reality into your amazing dreams for this future that you are going to bring to fruition.
Yeah, it's true. Getting out of sort of the woods and being able to see the whole forest.
Well, thank you guys. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks, Cassie.
Thank you, everybody.